I would now like to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Hart, and I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. Welcome to this virtual meeting of our board. I will now read the Indigenous land acknowledgement. Although this meeting is taking place virtually, we acknowledge that the land we are on as we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board also acknowledges Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed by multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Members, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none and hearing none, I'll move on. I'll now turn this meeting over to the board's executive director, Mr. Ryan Teschner, who will go over the meeting logistics. Mr. Teschner, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Hart, and thank you to everyone who has joined this virtual meeting. Please note that this meeting, as always, is being live streamed on the Toronto Police Service YouTube account and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. On the line right now, we have Chair Jim Hart, Vice Chair Councillor Francis Nunziata, Councillor Michael Ford, Member Ainsworth Morgan, Member Lisa Kostakis, and Member Ann Morgan. Mayor Tory will be joining shortly. On the line, we also have members of our board office staff, Chief Raymer and his command team, members of the service, and of course, members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations on some of our agenda items. As with our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and voted on by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be brought into the call by our colleague, Du Buchanan-Gisser, and as always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Chair Hart, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Board members, before we begin today's meeting, I would ask that we observe a moment of silence for Police Constable Jeffrey Northrup of 52 Division, who was tragically killed while responding to a call on July the 2nd, 2021. PC Northrup leaves behind his wife Margaret, his children, Brennan, Samantha, and Mitchell, and his mother Diane, along with his countless beloved colleagues and friends, and a community of people who sincerely cared for and respected him, as demonstrated by the hundreds of people that lined the streets of our city to honor him, and the thousands who attended his funeral. Highly respected and universally loved, he's widely described as both a giant in stature and in heart. By all accounts, Constable Northrup was an exceptional police officer and a remarkable human being, compassionate, good-humored, and kind. He was dedicated to his family and to his job. He loved helping people, always putting others first. I've heard that Constable Northrup would wake up hours before the beginning of his shift to bake brownies for his colleagues at 52 Division, just to put a smile on their faces. Constable Northrup cared too about his community, devoting his time and energy to the causes closest to his heart, scouting, the Special Olympics, among others, always doing all he could to enhance life for those around him. I know this tragic and sudden loss has been keenly felt by all those who had the honor of working with him and knowing him. While he'd be greatly missed, we know that Constable Northrup will be fondly remembered through the many lives he's touched and the countless friendships he has formed, and that his continuing legacy will live on in 52 Division, throughout the Toronto Police Service, and beyond, as he's remembered by all those who knew him and loved him, as you recall his wisdom and his wit, his kind character, and his positive demeanor with genuine love and affection. With his death, he has made the ultimate sacrifice to keeping his community safe. He will be remembered as the very epitome of a true hero. We extend our deepest gratitude for his service and for his sacrifice. I would now like to ask Chief Raymer to add a few comments before we take a moment of silence. Chief Raymer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the board's comments and for your support. Good morning, everyone. Earlier this month, we said goodbye to Constable Jeffrey Northrup, a brave Toronto police officer lost in service to the city. Jeff was everything we ask our officers to be: compassionate, selfless, and a model of professionalism. He will be greatly missed by his loving family, his friends and colleagues, and the communities he served for over 31 years. I really want to take a moment on behalf of the service to thank everyone, thank the public for the outpouring of condolences we received for Jeff's family and for the service. We appreciate everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll now ask everyone to take a moment of silence. Thank you. I'll now go through the agenda for holds and approvals. Item number 1 is the confirmation of minutes from the virtual public meeting held on June the 24th, 2021. Doobie, do we have deputants? Have they called in?
Not yet, sir.
Okay, since the deputants have not called in, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Councillor Ford, seconded by Vice Chair Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 1 carries. Item number 2 is corporate risk management. We have deputations on item number 2 as well as a presentation, so item number 2 is held down. Item number 3 is the new Toronto Police Service Board policy, budget transparency. We have deputations on item number 3, so item number 3 is held down. Item number 4 is the board policy, legal indemnification claims. We have a deputation on item number 4, so item number 4 is held down. Item number 5 is the amendment to uniform and equipment standards during the month of November. Can I have a motion to approve item number 5? Ms. Morgan, a seconder. Councillor Ford, all in favor. Any opposed? Item number 5 carries. Item number 6 is a contract award for endpoint equipment. Can I have a motion to approve item number 6? Ms. Kostakis, could I have a seconder? Mr. Morgan, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 6 carries. Item number 7 is a contract extension, asset inventory management system, software licensing, maintenance, and support. Can I have a motion to approve item number 7? Motion to approve, Ms. Kostakis, seconded by Ms. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 7 carries. Item number 8 is contract extension, computer-aided dispatch system, software support and maintenance. A motion to approve item number 8. Motion to approve, Ms. Kostakis. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 8 carries. Item number 9 is contract extension, server and storage hardware, software, maintenance and services for Onyx Enterprise Solutions and IBM Canada Limited. A motion to approve item number 9. Motion to approve, Ms. Kostakis. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 9 carries. Item number 10 is contract extension, networking, hardware, software, maintenance, and professional services. Could I have a motion to approve item number 10? Motion to approve, Ms. Kostakis. Could I have a seconder? Ms. Morgan, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 10 carries. Item number 11, contract extension, Versadex management system, software, support, and maintenance. Could I have a motion to approve item number 11? Motion to approve. Councillor Ford, could I have a seconder? Ms. Kostakis by a hair. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Item number 12 is special constable appointments. Could I have a motion to approve item number 12? Vice Chair Nunziata, could I have a seconder? Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 12 carries. Item number 13 is Toronto Police Service Board Special Fund Annual Specified Procedures Report for the year ended December the 31st, 2020. Could I have a motion to approve item number 13? Ms. Morgan, seconded by Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 13 carries. Item number 14 is Police Reform Recommendation 30, Diversity and Human Resources. We have a deputant on item number 14, so that's held down. Item number 15 is the Annual Report 2020 Training Program. We have deputants on item number 15, so that is held down. Item number 16 is a series of reports on Chief Administrative Investigations. Do I have a motion to approve all of the reports listed on item number 16, 16.1 through 16.7, or do members want to hold any down? Motion to approve, to receive rather. Councillor Ford, seconder. Mr. Morgan, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 16 carries. We'll now go back to the top of the agenda, which is item number 2, corporate risk management. Before we hear from the deputants, we have a presentation. So we'll do the presentation first, followed by deputants, followed by questions and speakers from the board. So presentation when you're ready, Chief.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Staff Superintendent Robert Johnson will conduct the presentation.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Chief, thank you very much. I have Detective Deanna Gagliardi here assisting me with the slide deck this morning and to help answer any questions that I may not be able to answer myself. So when we're ready to go here, we've got it. Okay, thank you. First slide, please. So corporate risk management provides support to the Toronto Police Service, ensuring that prescribed service standards concerning the administration, promotion, and support of professionalism are advanced in order to strengthen public trust and deliver quality police services. In 2020, corporate risk management reported to the Deputy Chief of Human Resources Command under the direction of a staff superintendent and was comprised of professional standard support, and the Toronto Police College. Some of the 2020 highlights, as shown in the slide deck before you here. Every year, the Toronto Police Service publishes the Corporate Risk Management Annual Report, which is then publicly released and made available to the community. Some of the 2020 highlights featured in the report include mention of the 24 out of the 81 police reform recommendations that members from Corporate Risk Management are working on. Expanded CEW deployment, an independent review regarding the service's CEW use, the race-based data collection strategy, human rights and workplace harassment training and results, from revisions to the service's strip search policies and procedures. The Corporate Risk Management Annual Report also provides statistical comparisons and trend analysis on the following topics: early interventions, awards, civil litigation, external applications to the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, public complaints, Police Services Act charges, use of force reporting, SIU investigations, and suspect apprehension pursuits. In 2020, there were 1,199 alerts triggered in relation to members, and 52 early intervention reports were generated as a result. This is compared to 2019, when 1,323 alerts were triggered and 67 early intervention reports were generated. Alerts and early intervention reports were down slightly from 2019 due to decreased interaction with members of the public during that pandemic. Early intervention program uses data collected in the Professional Standards Information System, otherwise known as PSIS, from reports that typically measure performance indicators or functions relating to a member. Some of these reports and thresholds include uniform external complaints, the threshold is 3, Uniform internal complaints, the threshold is 3. Firearm discharge, 2. Firearm pointed at a person is 3, but it triggers a mandatory early intervention report. Pursuits, 3. Civil litigation, 2. Human rights complaints, 2. SIU investigations, 2. And service via collisions, 2 at fault. An alert is generated when a member meets or exceeds a predetermined threshold. Thresholds are reviewed yearly to ensure they remain relevant. The incidences are reviewed by a detective in the analysis and assessment section to identify any emerging trends, wellness concerns, or atypical behavior. If concerns in an officer's performance are identified, an early intervention report is generated and shared with the member's supervisory team to assist in developing strategies to support the member. The early intervention program is a non-disciplinary process, instead focusing on taking a proactive approach to member wellness. In 2020, body-worn camera-equipped officers were added to the list of monitored officers in PCIS, in addition to new recruits as well, who are monitored for a period of 12 months from the date of deployment. The premise behind the early intervention program is to identify and address risky behavior before it negatively impacts an officer's performance or interactions with the public. In 2020, 428 internal awards were presented to members of the Toronto Police Service and the community, as well as other police services by the service and the Toronto Police Services Board. In addition, 2020 TPS members received a total of 240 awards from external agencies. Unfortunately, formal award ceremonies were cancelled and postponed due to the pandemic. In 2020, there were 83 civil actions and potential claims filed against the Toronto Police Services Board and TPS members. This represents a 24.5 decrease from 2019 and an 11.1 decrease compared to the 5-year average. You can see that in the chart. Of the 83 civil actions received in 2020, a total of 55 statements of claim were served, which is a decrease from 76 claims which were served in 2019. And it's also a decrease when compared to the 5-year average of 64.4 claims. It's possible that these the physical means to file a claim may have limited, the amount of claims we received due to the pandemic, and it might have contributed to the decrease in civil litigation in 2019. But that remains to be seen. In 2020, there were 15 human rights applications in relation to 15 separate incidences filed against the board, the chief, the service, and TPS members. This is the lowest number of applications received in the 10 years since the human rights system transitioned to a direct access model. 2020 represented a 6.3% decrease and is below the 5-year average of 23.6 applications. In 2020, the top 2 grounds of alleged discrimination were color and race. Color was the most alleged ground at 73.3% of applications, followed by race, which was 66.7% of the applications. Although race and color were the top 2 grounds, in 2020, the overall number of these classification allegations remained comparable to the previous 5 years. There were 12 human rights applications that were resolved in 2020. Of those 12, 1 was withdrawn by the applicant, 6 were dismissed by the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, 2 applications were abandoned, and 3 were settled. The Office of the Independent Police Review Director, or the OIPRD, is a civilian-staffed independent agency that acts as an objective, impartial office responsible for receiving, managing, and overseeing all public complaints against police officers in Ontario. It ensures complaints are dealt with in a transparent, effective, and fair manner for both the public and the police. In addition to managing public complaints, the OIPRD is responsible for establishing and administering the public complaint system, including oversight, systemic reviews, audits, education, and outreach programs. The investigation of complaints received by the OIPRD may be conducted by the OIPRD investigators themselves, an outside police agency, or the police services in question. The OIPRD reviews all complaints to determine their classification as either a conduct complaint, policy, or service complaint. Section 60 of the Police Services Act grants the OIPRD the discretion to screen out complaints. If the complaint is found to be frivolous, vexatious, made in bad faith, or not in the public interest, they will be screened out. In 2020, a total of 788 public complaints were received concerning the conduct of uniformed members, the policies, or the services of the Toronto Police Service. The total number of complaints in 2020, both investigated and screened out, represented an increase of 29.2% from 2019 and is above the 5-year average of 669.4 complaints. However, of the 788 complaints, only 298 were investigated, which means that 490 were screened out by the OIPRD. In 2019, there were 288 screened-in complaints that were investigated, so there is a difference of 10 complaints more this year more in 2020 over 2019, which is only a 3.5% increase. In 2020, discreditable conduct represented 56.4% of all complaints investigated, which is comparable to the 5-year trend of 50%. Allegations of unlawful or unnecessary exercise of authority accounted for 19.8% of allegations investigated in complaints in 2020, which is similar to the 5-year average of 23.8%. And allegations in relation to policy and service complaints decreased from 9% in 2019 to 7.4% in 2020. Year-to-date 2021, only 6% of all investigative complaints remain open, which means that 94% of all public complaints in 2020 were concluded. 41.9% of the investigated complaints received in 2020 were concluded with a disposition of unsubstantiated, compared to 45.1% in 2019. Complaint withdrawals represent 21.5% of the concluded 2020 complaints, compared to 20.8% in 2019. And informal resolutions made up 21.8% of concluded 2020 complaints, compared to 2019, where there were 22.9% resolved in this manner. It's important to note that the number of complaints where misconduct was identified continues to represent a small portion of all investigated complaints. Misconduct was identified in 4.7% of concluded 2020 complaints thus far, well below the 5-year average of 6%. The Toronto Police Service Disciplinary Tribunal is an administrative tribunal that is governed by the Statutory Power and Procedures Act of Ontario. The objectives of police discipline are to correct unacceptable behavior, deter others from similar behavior, and most importantly, maintain public trust. In 2020, 44 officers in relation to 46 cases were charged with 109 offences. This represents a decrease in both the number of officers and charges compared to the 2019 numbers. Just over half, or 52%, of all officers charged were off-duty at the time of the incident. Discreditable conduct and insubordination remained the top 2 most common charges. Furthermore, charges in relation to neglect of duty decreased from 8.3% in 2019 to 2.8% in 2020. And were well below the 5-year average of 10.2%. In 2020, 36 cases involving 15 officers concluded in the tribunal. In regards to the 15 officers, 5 cases involved officers who submitted guilty pleas. 6 officers had their charges withdrawn, 2 were found guilty, and 2 had their charges stayed. Penalties ranged from forfeiture of 3 to 8 days of pay, demotion of class from 1st to 2nd, and 1st to 4th class, as well as reprimands. Ontario Regulation 926 for 90 and TPS Procedure 15-01, use of force procedure compels each police officer involved in an incident to submit a use of force report to the Chief of Police whenever the member does one of 5 things. Uses physical force on another person that results in an injury that requires medical attention, draws a handgun in the presence of a member of the public, discharges a firearm, points a firearm regardless if it's a handgun or a long gun, uses a weapon other than a firearm on another person. Additionally, members are required to submit a use of force report and a conducted energy weapon use report to the Chief of Police when a conducted energy weapon or CEW is used by the member, either as a demonstrated force presence or in drive, stun, or full deployment mode, whether intentionally used or otherwise. In 2020, 2,095 use of force reports were submitted for the organization, representing 1,368 separate incidences where force was used. The number of incidences in 2020 decreased by 8.5% compared to the use of force rates for 2019. The chart above compares the number of reports submitted and the number of incidences annually from 2016 to 2020. In 2020, the use of CEW became the second most frequently used of force option for the first time. CEWs were used in 30.3% of all 2020 incidences compared to 29.8% in 2019. With respect to CEW use and mental health calls for service, the service continues to see a year-over-year increase in calls for person in crisis. In 2020, officers attended 33,059 calls for service involving people in crisis, which is an increase of 7.7% over 2019. In 62% of the cases, the type of CEW use was reported as demonstrated force presence only. Furthermore, in 2020, the percentage of incidences involving persons in crisis where a CEW was fully deployed was less than 1%. It's actually 0.14%, so it's obviously less than 1. Therefore, even though police officers attended more calls for persons in crisis in 2020, they used the CEW less when compared to 2019 deployment rates. With respect to the discharge of police-issued firearms, in 2020 there were 15 incidences where 17 officers discharged their firearms. This is a decrease in firearm-related incidences compared to 2019, where there were 23 incidences involving 23 officers. The chart provided gives an indication of the incident types where a discharge occurred. It should be noted that only 1.2% of all use of force incidences are related to animals. In 2020, the SIU invoked its mandate and investigated 64 incidences compared to 46 incidences in 2019. This represents a 39.1% increase in the number of 2020 incidences. The increase in SIU investigations primarily reflects the legislative and procedural changes enacted under the new Special Investigations Unit Act. The new SIU Act mandates all police agencies in Ontario to report the discharge of less lethal firearms, which wasn't enforced before, as well as serious injuries. The definition was interpreted to include a threshold injury that was not previously included. Furthermore, there has also been a change in approach to the definition of serious injury, which I just mentioned, which both contributed to the increase in number of SIU cases investigated. Increases in these particular classifications are reflected in the 2020 SIU stats, substantiate the service's reporting, compliance, and alignment to and in support of the provincial oversight body. Of the incidences occurring in 2020, 35 cases were concluded with the subject officers being exonerated. The SIU withdrew its mandate in 17 of the cases. There were no cases that resulted in officers being criminally charged in 2020, and there are still 12 cases that are ongoing. Increases noted in the number of custody-related and vehicle-related incidences must be framed within the general context of other noted trends throughout 2020, such as increased calls for person in crisis, the increased traffic enforcement and resulting provincial offense tickets issuances. In particular, speeding infractions increased by 155.3% in 2020. It's important to note that when comparing the number of SIU investigations to the documented number of community contacts officers had in 2020, there was one SIU incident investigated for every 14,906 contacts. That's less than 0.01%. Legislation governing police pursuits in Ontario is found in Ontario Regulation 2610, entitled Suspect Apprehension Pursuits. According to the regulation, a suspect apprehension pursuit occurs when a police officer attempts to direct the driver of a motor vehicle to stop and the driver refuses to obey the officer. The regulation allows an officer to pursue or continue to pursue a fleeing vehicle that fails to stop if the officer has reason to believe that a criminal offense has been committed or is about to be committed, or for the purposes of motor vehicle identification or the identification of an individual in the vehicle. In 2020, 359 failed to stop reports were submitted, representing a 19.7% increase from 2019. It's important to note that not all instances of failing to stop for police result in a pursuit. Further, while the fail to stop report is mandated by the ministry, the decision to engage in pursuing a suspect vehicle that has failed to stop for police is entirely a different matter. Both circumstances are captured on the same ministry form. With respect to pursuits in 2020, the number of pursuits initiated increased 14.5% from 228 in 2019 to 261 in 2020. In summary, the fail to stop reports submitted in 2020 resulted in of all the fail to stop reports submitted in 2020, 72.7% related in the initiation of a pursuit. As previously stated, it's important to frame the increase in pursuit-related incidences within the context of general traffic enforcement and trends throughout 2020. For instance, provincial offense tickets issued to members of the public increased by 27.7% in 2020. Of the pursuits initiated in 2020, 42.1% resulted from the commission of offences under the Highway Traffic Act. Within the Highway Traffic Act category, the most common reason for initiating a pursuit was in relation to moving violations, representing 28.7% of all pursuits initiated. In particular, speeding infractions increased by 155.3% in 2020. Moving violations have consistently remained the most common reason for initiating a non-criminal pursuit over the last 5 years, representing 26.3% of all pursuits. However, of all the pursuits in 2020, 61.7% were discontinued by officers, compared to 56% in 2019. 8.8% of all pursuits resulted in a collision, and 6.9% of all pursuits resulted in injuries. Of the 66 pursuits members engaged in, there were 335 charges laid, which was a 2.5% increase in total charges compared to the 5-year average. In 2020, the Toronto Police College incorporated strategic following as a practical exercise into refresher, remedial, and advanced police vehicle operations training. This practical exercise emphasizes alternatives to pursuits and develops officers' patience, communication, and planning skills when encountering vehicle investigations with the potential to result in a pursuit while operating a marked police vehicle. Engaging with the public in a safe manner continues to be the #1 focus during a pursuit. In March of 2021, the Toronto Police Services Board approved the new Toronto Police Services organizational chart. Units assigned to the Corporate Risk Management Command were either realigned under 4 remaining commands or absorbed into the new Strategy and Risk Management Unit. Looking ahead, members from Professional Standards, the Toronto Police College, Legal Services, and various sections under the Strategy and Risk Management Unit continue to proactively identify strategic issues, goals, and initiatives intended to promote professional and ethical conduct while continuing to place an emphasis on officer training, education, and wellness. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. We will now move to deputants, followed by questions and speakers from the board. Doobie, I believe we have only 2 of our 3 deputants have called in. Is that correct?
No, sir. The third deputant also called. We'll start with Miguel Villar-Velarde.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Miguel, you should receive a prompt from the system now. Miguel, if you can hear me, you need to unmute yourself. I'm not getting a response from Miguel at this point. We'll try to reach out to him. So we'll move on to Derek. Derek, you should receive a prompt from the system now.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I'm just going to start my timer here. So in this report, it says the goal of this module was to provide members with current information related to COVID-19 and the workplace. So I just want to help corporate risk management to make it easier to assess the risk of Toronto police officers contracting the ever-scary Delta variant. So I've provided a link from the Public Health of England, if you're looking at the screenshot in my written presentation, who have found that the variant before the Delta variant, which was the Alpha variant, has a case fatality rate of 1.9%. Now remember that SARS had a fatality rate of 10%. They also note that this Delta variant has a case fatality rate of 0.1%. Now remember, it's Dr. Davila who keeps saying that the UK is the jurisdiction she uses most as a comparable to us here. So not only did the Public Health of England find out this previous variant to the Delta variant, the Alpha variant, is like, 19,000 times more fatal than the Delta. They're also implying that if the Delta variant has a case fatality rate of 0.1%, that means for those who end up contracting it, that the Delta variant also comes with it a 99.9% survival rate. Think about that. That's why we couldn't all meet as usual at police headquarters today for this meeting, because these quack medical officers of health are concealing from us that this Delta has a 99.9% survival rate. But You still have to wear your mask out of fear of being hurt by the police if they get called on you because you weren't wearing it indoors. There's still restrictions on gatherings indoors, which won't be completely lifted until you give in to getting a vaccine. Not to mention the growing call to enter us into the beginning of 1930s Germany with show us your papers, please, vaccine passports in order to move around society, all because our lying medical officers of health are not telling us this Delta variant has a 99% survival rate. 99.9%. It is beyond staggering to think of the fraud that is being pulled over on all of us, and which will continue to be pulled over on all of us, because those like Mayor Tory will continue to enable it even after being presented with this evidence. And if he does not, and if he does, then I at least expect him to resign from this board, if not as mayor. So also, I present the screenshot of what Public Health of England in my written presentation had to say on that. So in this report, it also says, March 17th, 2020, Premier Doug Ford declared a state of emergency for Ontario. The provincial lockdown was quickly followed by Toronto Mayor John Tory declaring a local state of emergency on March 23rd, 2020. So in my written presentation, I provide the YouTube link where at the beginning of all this, Minister Haidu and Minister Freeland mentioned that Canada, after SARS, already had in place a pandemic plan that was co-authored by Dr. Theresa Tam on how to respond to the next one, that being this COVID. I just want to point out a few things that were mentioned, recommended on what not to do, as maybe it can be corporate risk management at the TPS who will be the ones to finally recommend following the actual health guidelines. I want to mention on page 227, this pandemic plan mentioned that there is no evidence that the use of masks in general public settings will be protective when the virus is circulating widely in the community. So some things that the pandemic plan mentioned on what not to do. Thermal scanning in public places, that was not recommended. Increased frequency of cleaning of surfaces in public settings, not recommended. Implement hand sanitizing stations in public settings, not recommended. Actively restrict travel to and from affected areas, not recommended. Use of masks by well individuals, not recommended. Dr. DeVille still ignored that. And broad restrictions on indoor public gatherings, not recommended. Not only are we doing that, we have a unit at the Toronto Police Service that goes around breaking up that stuff, even though it was not recommended. And that's my time.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Thanks once again, Derek. Doobie, can you put on the next deputant?
Yes, so next deputant is Barbara Castledine. Barbara should receive a request from the system now. Press *6. Be unmuted.
Hello.
Barbara?
Hi.
I'm hearing. I'm getting some feedback.
Okay.
Barbara?
Yes.
All right. So we're ready for you to go. We can hear you.
Yes. Yeah.
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Hey, why continue paying for officers' bad behavior? I read the OHR recommendations of the OHRC process. Propose those 10 steps to end systematic racism and policing, and I support these changes. Premier Doug Ford made changes to Liberal approved Safer Ontario Act with the Ontario Police Act in 2019. Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act that undoing all the progressive recommendations to deal with the police officers' discipline and pay at home while on trial. These changes are good, but they cannot be done under the Doug Ford government. A new premier is needed. On June 22nd, 2021, a group of Indigenous and women were attending a sacred fire. 10 in total, and 4 people arrested, including my girlfriend, which is me, Barbara, which I have stage 4 cancer in remission, myself and a young woman and a resident of the Trinity Bellwoods Park. We were arrested, handcuffed, and put in a paddy wagon for 2 hours, charged as trespassing on a public park. Why is that possible, John Tory? Mayor Tory, how is it possible that Indigenous people can hold ceremony space to remember the children found in Canada at Trinity Bellwoods Park, and we advise police and corporate, yeah, security. We were told to leave and put the fire down. Anyone knows about truth and reconciliation. Corporate risk management paid legal. Indemnification. 2 persons hurt by Toronto police officers. Court settlements such as human rights tribunals or other courts are handled by the city solicitor office, who attends these court hearings as well, and the chief's lawyer and the city's lawyers. A single person without legal reputation, whatever. We need to change that injustice. Here. City solicitor office, who attends these court hearings as well, and the chief's lawyer and the city's lawyers. A single person without legal reputation, whatever. We need to change that injustice. Here. City solicitor office, who attends these court hearings as well, and the chief's lawyer and the city's lawyers. A single person without legal reputation, whatever. We need to change that injustice. Here. City solicitor office, who attends these court hearings as well, and the chief's lawyer and the city's lawyers.
We're having trouble hearing you. You're breaking up.
I think we might have lost her.
Yeah, I think. Ms. Castledine, we actually can't hear you, so I'm going to end your deputation here because we're having trouble hearing you. Yeah. We're sorry about that. You must be having technical difficulties on your end, but thank you very much for calling in. Okay. Duby, can you put on the next deputant?
The next deputant is, again, Miguel Avila Velarde. I'll try to unmute him. Miguel, you just press *6. I'm told that he wrote on our YouTube chat that it's not working for him. So we're trying to reach out and get this sorted out. Miguel, if you can hear me now. I'm not getting any response.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Perhaps we'll hear from him on another matter later. So we'll now take this item to the board, and board members, first of all, any questions of the service? Board members? Mr. Morgan first.
Thanks, Chair Hart. And thanks again for the presentation. Very thorough and a lot of information there. I just a point of clarification for me when you talk about the complaints and how they are sort of categorized or charted. Hello? Sorry, I thought I heard someone there. I guess just a point of clarification in terms of how the complaints that are lodged, how they're sort of categorized. And I noticed that there was a field for race and for color, and I'm just wondering how that distinction is made or the purpose for that.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I think there are 9 code of conduct offenses under Part 5, and the first one was subcategories is discreditable conduct, and in there you'll see, you know, where race and color ancestry is mentioned. So if the complaint comes in and it offends that portion of the code, then it's categorized as such. So the overarching category would be discreditable conduct, but then I think there are maybe 8 or 10 subcategories that break it out. For instance, incivility, use of profane language, other conduct that might be discreditable to the reputation of the service or the member is categorized like that. So the race and color are actually subcategories of a discreditable conduct descriptor. And obviously, it would be from the substance of the complaint. There'd have to be allegations that point in that direction to make the subclassifications.
Okay, I guess I was just trying to get a sense of how the distinction between how that distinction is made between race and color. I guess it's more so that understanding, but.
So sometimes, Mr. Morgan, it's very explicit. A member of the public will make a complaint and specifically state that they believe that's the reasons why an officer took action or didn't. And sometimes there's some nuances, and that's where, you know, the investigation has to probe in those areas through the written complaint, usually how it comes in, and then a verbal interview with the complainant to explore those areas, as well as you know, other evidence that may come to light as a result of engaging in that investigation.
Okay, thank you very much. I just saw that there's some follow-up with that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Vice Chair Nunziata.
Yes, I just have one question, type of force. Can you explain the handgun drawn, not pointed? Can you explain that to me, because that's gone up?
Okay, so there are 2 categories. So the handgun drawn would be a situation where a member perceives that there's a threat. Pointed would be when they confirm. So, for instance, if they're told, you know, a member of a member that they were encountering might be armed, it may trigger a situation where an officer would just draw his or her weapon, keep it by their side. If they encounter somebody with an edged weapon, or let's say a firearm, they may then escalate that to actually pointing it. Now, the problem is on the provincial use of force form, it captures the drawing of the firearm. It doesn't capture the pointing it's the pointing, not the drawing. So only one of them are captured on the use of force form. Our CEW and use of force forms capture both. So there's some discrepancy in the reporting of the information because of the 2 different categories on both forms. I'm led to believe that the province will be amending that use of force form to make sure that it captures more comprehensively. I don't know if that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much for answering that question, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any further questions from board members? I can't see Councillor Ford, so he'll have to speak up if he has questions. Any questions? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, can I ask for a motion?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Doobie, I think that's a deputant speaking.
Yeah, I think that's Miguel.
I had trouble with my phone, sir.
Oh, is that Miguel?
Yes, it is.
Okay, with
the one and only.
If you could just hold on for 1 second, Miguel. With the indulgence of the board, Miguel had technical difficulties. He's registered to speak on this item, and I recommend that we allow him to speak now. I assume everyone concurs with that. Okay, Miguel, whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm going to be easy on you guys. I just want to educate those who are listening in today. All right? I'm going to be simple. corporate management, when they handle cases at at Ontario Human Rights Tribunals or other court jurisdictions, risk management contacts the city solicitor's office. The city solicitor's offices contact the insurance company for the city of Toronto. In previous years, used to be Primerica, I believe. It had changed hands every so often, correct? So the truth of the matter is here that the settlements that are reached at court are paid by taxpayers. That is the truth. You can ask any lawyer in the city of Toronto, and they can agree with me, and they will agree with you. It's time to put an end to that cycle of nonsense where the city of Toronto, the taxpayer, I'm looking at Michael Ford, respect for taxpayers, my brother. This is about respect for the taxpayer who pays extremely higher, or some people disagree that the city of Toronto property taxes are low. But it is hard, especially after a pandemic, for many to maintain, keep paying high taxes. So a lot of people have lost their businesses, and I agree with a lot of the statements made by my brother Derek Moran, that many of the aspects that have occurred in the last 15 months will have a really impact on the city risk management and the city solicitors. This service, as you are aware, is paid by city taxpayers. They pay this service a huge amount to maintain $1.1 billion of the total cost for the Toronto Police Services. So it is also important to remember that today the Ontario Human Rights Commission has released 10 points to end systemic racism. I totally agree with them. I read also your response as well. My recommendation is that we need to ask the province to undo the changes made by Mr. Doug Ford, the Comprehensive Ontario's Police Services Act of 2019, which many of the progressive changes left behind by the government of Caitlin Wynne, the Safer Ontario Act, dealt strictly with officers' discipline, and the other one that is a pain in the ear to many taxpayers is how is it possible that a police officer gets paid while staying at home, while many of us, if we had to stay at home to wait for the trial, we don't receive any help at all. Specifically, the Ontario Legal Aid, they don't provide with proper funding to hire a lawyer if we need to go to court to fight tickets like that we receive at Trinity Bellwoods Park on June the 22nd for trespass in a public park. Remember, members, public parks are public land. In no way, shape, or form, we residents of Toronto want to buy the story that it is somehow become a private property. So, like I said before, I'm going to be easy on you guys, and I don't need to repeat what people have said already on social media. It ranges from requesting the resignation of John Tory to resign Doug Ford, and many names in the process. But anyhow, thank you so much, Chairman Hart, for allowing me to speak. And I apologize for the technology issues that I encountered. And I look forward to continue this conversation whenever you are ready to ask questions. I'm here 24 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm glad you were able to get on. Board members, any questions of Miguel? Seeing none. Once again, Miguel, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We all appreciate it. Have a good day. Okay, board members, I have asked about questions and speakers, and we have done both of those. So now it's time for a motion to receive item 2.1 and item 2.2. Could I have a motion to receive these items? Vice Chair Nunziata, seconded by Ms. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 2 is carried. We'll now move forward with item number 3. Item number 3 is the new Toronto Police Service Board Policy, Budget Transparency Policy. Doobie, do we have one deputant? We have 2 registered. Do we have 1 on the line or 2?
We have only 1 on the line. Dianush Yousefi. Dianush should be receiving a prompt from the system now to unmute. Oops, sorry. Dianush, I accidentally remuted you. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Good morning. Just want to make sure that I'm heard now.
Yes, you are. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Hart and members of the board. I'm here on behalf of the Law Union to make deputations about an aspect of the budget that you've heard from us before. We've made deputations and we've sent you letters in the past. But here we are again. We supported the board's step to enshrine principles of budget transparency and accountability in the past in a former board policy. For example, the August 19, 2020 police reform motion required the chief of police to break down the line-by-line budget items by individual program area, function, service delivered, subject to the need to protect investigative techniques and operations, and in such a way as to provide maximum transparency to the public. We supported this position of the board, but it is clear that the board is not taking steps to comply with its own motion and its own adopted principles. This is a significant problem. The 2020 and 2021 budgets did not provide this level of detail or anything close to it. The 2020 budget provided only line-by-line listings of very general accounting items like police uniforms and police salaries. The 2020 budget failed to provide any figures or breakdowns for big budget items like intelligence, guns, and gangs and drugs. The 2021 budget was even more opaque. And so what that meant was that there was no breakdown for important activities and programs undertaken by the police. It was impossible for the public to know how much was actually spent by the TPS on important areas like policing racialized neighborhoods, policing the mentally ill, attendance of police officers in court, inquests, or civil suits arising out of deaths and injuries caused by the police use of force. And this is information that the public has a right to know. If you want the public to engage in meaningful conversation about the police budget, and you've said that you do, this information has to be available. And so the public is left with the question of why? Why is this information not being made available? Is it perhaps that the board doesn't want us to know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on bringing hundreds of police officers, police horses, drone, private security, city staff to forcibly remove people from encampments, to just shuffle homeless people around, and in that context also injure others? If there is the will to make this information available to the public, it can be done. If there is a will to ensure that the public can understand the police budget, can have some kind of meaningful and intelligent discussion about it, the information must be made available. If we want to be able to look at what is really necessary in policing and what is the best way to spend the public's money to provide the kinds of services and support that people need, to provide assistance to people who are dealing with mental health issues, people who are homeless, then this information needs to be available. And again, you know, one last time I'm going to repeat that the failure to provide this information really can only lead to the conclusion that the board doesn't want the public properly engaged, doesn't want the public to be fully informed. And it just should not be that way. Just, you've adopted the policy, you've adopted the motion. You need to make sure that that information is made available for the 2020-21 budgets and every one of them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Appreciate it. And I can assure you that this board wants to be as transparent as humanly possible. Mr. Teschner was the author of this report. I'm going to ask him for some brief comments, and then I would suggest, following that, Mr. Veneziano, you may want to make some comments about what is doable in the short term and what your strategy is around transparency in the long term. So I think it's important for people to understand how much work has gone into this already and how much more work needs to be done. So Mr. Teschner, first, if you can make a couple of comments and then followed by Mr. Veneziano, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the deputant's comments and questions. This service and board has been on a journey to enhance budget transparency that has lasted several years, but it hit a high watermark with the police reform recommendations. Members of the public will be aware that there were about 10 recommendations in Chair Hart's report that focused on budget transparency, accountability, and the provision of more information to members of the public. The direction from the board was to roll all of this up into a policy direction, which is what the board has before it today. I can tell you from our look around Ontario and Canada, I'm not aware of any other police services board or commission that has dedicated a specific policy to budget transparency. I also, and Mr. Veneziano can speak to this a little bit more, am fairly confident that the Toronto Police Service has been out ahead in terms of the provision of public information regarding the budget. When we look at the efforts that were made leading up to the 2021 budget, not only was there additional detail and information provided so much as the systems that we use will allow, but we also engaged in public engagement that allowed members of the public to ask questions about what they were seeing in the budget information and get responses from the service through a Q&A that was posted on the website. We had a lot of uptake on that website, which we think is an indication that people in fact are engaged and are paying attention. And of course, we don't stand still. The intent of this policy is to set a broad direction, but we work with the service to ensure that we continue to make this evergreen, as we can provide more information in different ways, as we learn of new techniques and tools that allow us to do that. That is the direction that this policy is encouraging the board to adopt. So those are my comments in terms of context, Mr. Chair. But perhaps Mr. Veneziano has some additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Mr. Veneziano, over to you. I think you're on mute, Mr. Veneziano.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
So good morning, board members, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to add to Mr. Teschner's comments. The service has been very committed to budget transparency and ensuring that the public and key stakeholders have the information that they need to make informed decisions with respect to our budget. Having said that, and as Mr. Teschner pointed out, we are not stopping at a line by line, which is really, we're somewhat constrained by the financial system that, all of us at the city use, which is really more towards command, pillar, unit level sort of reporting of financial information. So what we've done, and this is in line with the board policy, which you'll see uses the words enhance and improve, we're moving to what we call service-based budgeting, where we give the public, and we'll be giving the public, a view of our budget based on the services that we provide. As an example, response to 911 calls, investigations, how much time and resources and people we have dedicated to investigations, both at the unit level in divisions and more broadly, at a corporate level in terms of homicides and that sort of information. So we are committed to budget transparency. I think we've demonstrated that over the past. I think we are a leader in that space by virtue of the fact that other services come to us and have come to us to ask basically what sort of information we provide. But we're also very aligned with and will respond to the board policy and support the policy. And we're aligned with the city, which is also moving in that direction. So we think that the progress that we've made to date is good, but we don't want to stop there. We feel, in fact, that we can provide an even better information for the public so that people do know exactly where their tax dollars are being spent. And that is my comments, unless there's further questions.
Thanks to both of you. That was very helpful. Before we have questions of staff, are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to call in and give us your perspective. It's very helpful. Thank you. Any questions on the report itself, board members? Anyone wish to speak to the report? Can I have someone move approval of item number 3? Councillor Ford, can I have a seconder? Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 3 carries. We now move forward to item number 4, which is the board policy, legal, indemnification claims. And we have one deputant, Derek, on that item. When Derek is ready, Doobie.
Derek, you should receive a prompt now.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I'm just going to start my timer here. So in this report it says, board staff in consultation with the Toronto Police Service have been conducting a review of board policies with the objective of modernizing and making consistent how the policies provide for the effective management and oversight of the service. As part of this review, board staff have looked for ways to enhance good governance, oversight, and transparency. One recommendation I have for the board is to make it a policy that the board expects of itself to follow what is known as the letter of the law, and that it also expects of the Toronto Police Service to follow the letter of the law themselves. And you may have noticed, Chair Hart, that I've been sending emails about this issue to the Ombudsman and Integrity Commissioner at the City of Toronto. And I just recently heard back about this from the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, the email which I have included in my written presentation, which reads, Dear Derek, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission confirms receipt of your inquiry of July 2nd and 9, 2021, in which you asked whether the Commission still expects both members of police boards and police officers to uphold the letter of the law. For your reference, the Commission is an independent quasi-judicial agency. It hears appeals, adjudicates applications, conducts investigations, and resolves disputes regarding the oversight and provision of policing services. The Commission operates through 2 independent divisions, one adjudicative and the other investigative, under one registrar. The Commission's powers and duties come from the Police Services Act. The Commission does expect members of police boards and police officers to uphold the letter of the law. And that's from Sincerely Larissa Sciarra, or Ciara, Director of Operations. And just so I don't run out of time at the end, I had a quick question for Chief Raymer regarding this, and that is simply, does Chief Raymer expect a Toronto police officer to uphold the letter of the law? I bring this up as I recalled since the last meeting. This is actually mentioned in the codes of conduct as set out by the Integrity Commissioner at the City of Toronto. Here's what it says in the one for the Code of Conduct for members of local boards. Members of local boards shall seek to serve the city's and the public's interest by upholding both the letter and the spirit of applicable laws of the Federal Parliament and Ontario Legislature and the laws and policies of council and of the local board of which they are a member. Here's the definition from Black's Law Dictionary 9th edition for letter of the law. The strictly literal meaning of the law, rather than the intention or policy behind it. There's some case law on the letter of the law. This is from National Trust versus H&R Block Canada 2003, where the Supreme Court of Canada said, legislation must be interpreted having regard to the objective, spirit, and letter of the law. Ottawa versus Royal Trust 1964, Supreme Court of Canada said. On the other hand, if the Crown seeking to recover the tax cannot bring the subject within the letter of the law, the subject is free. This is from Murray Bay Motor versus Blair Insurance, 1973, Supreme Court of Canada, said that the duty of the courts is to give effect to the letter of the law. And this is from something from off of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board website. It says the role of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board is to oversee the provision of police services in the city of Thunder Bay and on a contract basis to Oliver Papaguni, I think it says. The board is the civilian trustee of the public interest as it pertains to police services in the community. A person appointed to the Thunder Bay Police Services Board shall be neither a member of the council nor an employee of the municipality. And that should be another board policy there, the Toronto Police Services Board, that members of municipal council, especially the CEO, not be allowed to be a member of the board. And that's all I had to say. And just back to that quick question I had for Chief Rammer.
Thank you, Derek. Chief, would you like to comment on Derek's question?
I think my only comment really is that officers use discretion, and they all have the ability to use discretion as independent agents of the Crown. And I think, quite frankly, that element of discretion is very important in their work. And I think it, in fact, streamlines the justice system because they engage in that work, and it's good for the public that we operate that way. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with the letter of the law, though. But anyways.
Board members, any questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Thank you, Derek, for taking the time. Appreciate it. Board members, any questions on the report itself? Anyone wish to speak to the item? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve item number 4? Motion to approve, Mayor Tory, seconded by Ms. Kostakis. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 4 carries. We now move forward. We have 2 items left on our agenda. We're now moving forward to item number 14, which is Police Reform Recommendation 30, Diversity and Human Resources. And I believe we have Derek up again. Doobie, when Derek's ready.
Yep, Derek, there you go.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
When you're ready. Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I'm just going to start my clock. I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show, if agents on behalf of the Ministry of Transportation ever call the Toronto Police on me again, that if I have ever led 42 division officers and or this board to believe in any way that I am surety for the person I have, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask all of you to please forgive me. The subject of this report is Police Reform Recommendation. In this report, it mentions community trust, building community trust 3 times. One easy way to build community trust is to actually tell us of the existence of the trust. I mean, breach of trust is mentioned twice in the criminal code, right? So there's obviously a trust that's involved in all this. So this is from the Supreme Court of Canada, 2018, Villard Construction versus Bird Construction, which said, in general, wherever it could be said to be to the unreasonable disadvantage of the beneficiary not to be informed of the trust's existence, the trustee's fiduciary duty includes an obligation to disclose the existence of the trust. While this arises most frequently in cases where the beneficiary's interest under the trust is conditional upon attaining the age of majority, equity imposes upon trustees a duty to disclose to beneficiaries the existence of the trust in a variety of circumstances. So here's an email I just sent last night. Hi, Deputy Attorney General Corbett. So in Villard Construction versus Bird Construction, the Supreme Court of Canada said the trustee's fiduciary duty includes an obligation to disclose the existence of the trust. As there are 2 sections in the criminal code that refer to breach of trust, can you confirm for me the existence of the trust and what is the exact name of this trust? And before that, I've emailed this same question to the MPP for my area, Robin Martin, Premier Ford, Deputy Premier Christine Elliott, and Attorney General Douglas Downey. All no answer. Well, what happened? I've kept hearing throughout this stage pandemic from Premier Ford all about how transparent he thinks his government is. But they're all just going to remain silent and ignore answering my question. Building community trust should be easy to do, but I know it's hard to do if you're working for the government. Just be transparent, perform your duty of candor owed to us, tell the truth, and provide accurate information to the public. As an example, I'm thinking of how I recently heard Superintendent Carter on CP24 comment, "The park is theirs." In referring to the park, he was talking about belonging to the City of Toronto. In reality, here's what the Ontario Divisional Court said in 2016 in Hussein versus, ironically, the City of Toronto. The importance of public spaces was explained by Chief Justice Lamer in Committee for the Commonwealth of Canada versus Canada 1991. The quasi-fiduciary nature of the government's right of ownership was indeed clearly set out by the U.S. Supreme Court in Hague versus Committee for Industrial Organization, which said, wherever the title of streets and parks may rest, they have immemorially been held in trust for the use of the public, and time out of mind have been used for purposes of assembly, communicating thoughts between citizens, and discussing public questions. And by the way, how does Miguel get arrested at Trinity Bellwoods Park last month when it was Mayor Tory who said the reason it was being done was so other people could enjoy the park too, as the encampments were taking up too much space at the park? If that's the case, Miguel said he was there, I think, partaking in some native sacred fire ceremony, which then contradicts what Mayor Tory said, that the purpose was so others, everyone else could enjoy the park too. But you know what? I think Mayor Tory's got enough pull in this town, just as he assured you he'd get you the votes for that council appointment last term. Mayor Tory could also use his mighty influence to make that charge against Miguel's person magically disappear. And I expect Miguel to keep us updated on that every month. And if you notice at the bottom of my written presentation, there's just a picture that says the napkin religion is the one true religion because it says so right here on this napkin, which just points out that just because somebody from the government says so doesn't make it true.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, once again, thanks very much, Derek. Any questions, board members, on the report itself? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak to the report? Also seeing none, can I have a motion to receive item number 14? Motion to receive, Mayor Tory, seconded by Ms. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 14 carries. We now move on to the last item on the public agenda, which is the annual report 2020 training program. Do we have 3 deputants have called in? We have all 3?
Yes, sir. We'll start with Miguel, who's using Barbara's phone. Miguel, if you can unmute. There you go.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak using Barbara's phone. Barbara would like to say a few words. Barbara, I'm
not feeling very well, so I'll give Miguel permission, please.
She's asking me to speak for her. So, but I will start first, if that is okay, Mr. Hart.
Yes, go right ahead, Miguel.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the kind words from my brother, Derek Moran. He nailed it right on. I think Indigenous people's rights were trampled on by police officers who were and attendance during the raid at Trinity Bellwoods Park. And Barbara, my girlfriend as well, we were both arrested along with an Indigenous woman and a resident from the park. So this is the statement by the Lamport Stadium encampment. During the early hours of Wednesday, July the 21st, hundreds of police officers descended on Lamport Stadium Park. City workers proceed to fence in encampment residents and their supporters. As a drone hovered overhead, security guards warned people to leave or face arrest for trespassing. Then, brandishing steel batons, police move in. They hit someone in the face, breaking their nose and splitting open their forehead and lips. They slammed someone else's head into the pavement, leaving them with a concussion. They choke and toss another person by their neck. 2 people are now in casts and will require further x-rays to determine if bones were broken. Police punch, kick, club, and pepper spray dozens of other people and arrested 34. I was one of those persons who was maced at 14th Division, and several dozens young people were also maced. Encampment residents and their supporters were peacefully standing the ground that day, painting signs and having a barbecue. Residents refused to leave because they have nowhere else to go. At least 24 people live at the Lamport encampment before the eviction. Almost all are living still outside, scattered to other parts in the city. And that is true, Mr. Mayor. Barbara and I, we were around Alexander Park, one of the small parquets, and we have seen the tents going up. So the problem is it's just being sent somewhere else, away from the bigger parks. But that is the problem that we are facing, the lack of social housing, Mr. Mayor. Previous governments, conservatives, liberals, they all neglected to invest in social housing in Toronto. Do you remember the day when the city of Toronto was amalgamated into one city? We lost funding at that moment by the previous government of Mike Harris. Mike Harris downloaded the problems to the cities because previously in the 1990s, the Liberals under Jean Chrétien, Prime Minister, decided to cut off funding to federal money to the provinces. So that is the situation we're facing with. And also, Mr. Mayor, inclusionary zoning has been one of the major topics of discussion at City Hall. Time and time again, we tell you and other city councilors that the best way to address the lack of housing is to dedicate 10% or more in the new condo developments across the city of Toronto, modeling in the successful model of the city of Montreal, who, believe it or not, they are asking developers up to 30% of units for residents and RGI. So imagine that. We will not have this type of problems that we are facing today. And also the shame, the excessive use of force on residents of Toronto. My girlfriend, Barbara, is a stage 4 cancer patient. And at Trinity Bellwoods Park, we asked your officers, please do not harm Barbara. But they did not listen to her. She was tackled down by 4 police officers and put to the ground. How is that shameful in the training? Is that part of the training, Mr. John Tory? I want some questions to be answered today. Why is it part of the training to trample down on someone who has an illness? Where is the human rights perspective? Where are we? If you're serious, like you said on your statement today in response to the OAHR, the 10 points, you say that you are willing to cooperate. You say that you agree, that you said many things, Mr. Hart, on your letter, but these are just words. Words needs to be put into practice. And the problem that we still have in this province, as I mentioned before, Can I continue now, Mr. Hart?
Miguel, you're at
5
5.
minutes are.
Miguel, can I just interrupt you for a second? You're at 5 minutes and 15 seconds now. Have you covered everything you want to cover for yourself and for Barbara?
No, I have not. There's a part I want to educate the Toronto Police Services with regards.
Just one other
sacrifice.
question, Miguel. Miguel, one other question before you go on. Are you speaking for Barbara as well? So this is both deputations rolled into one. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Miguel. I'll give you a few more minutes.
Okay, so my goal today is to educate the service because we're talking training of police officers. I know, Mr. Mayor, you were kind enough to spend vacation time, pay with your money to travel to Northern Ontario, and you experienced yourself the benefits, the spirituality of First Nations people when you attended their communities to learn what are the problems that Indigenous people face in Canada, especially housing. So I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, you participated of a sacred fire, you know, the smoking of the tobacco, of the pipe, you know, the ceremony to put down sage, tobacco, sweetgrass, and other herbs that are considered to be of spiritual value for First Nations people. So what is a sacred fire? I took this information from the Ontario Aboriginal Housing.ca, a housing agency for Indigenous people. A sacred fire is an Indigenous traditional wellness approach. The fire is one of the ways to start a ceremony or any sacred event. It is a spiritual doorway that opens to a spiritual realm so that individuals can communicate and have relations through the fire. It is also used to connect with our ancestors, the ones who have gone on before us. We put tobacco in the fire and acknowledge our ancestors and request prayers. We are only allowed to put sacred items, tobacco, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and or food into the fire. The sacred fire is never left alone. It is watched and attended to by a firekeeper. Firekeepers are men and women are usually not allowed to take care of the fire. So, the protocols of the sacred fire, to be alcohol and drug-free up to 4 days. Bring positive thoughts, prayers, and miigwechis, thankfulness. We cannot take pictures or videotape the fire. Women who are at moon time, this is when they're the most powerful and strongest and must not participate in ceremonies. Always be respectful and ask questions if needed. When entering into the lodge, we enter in the eastern direction, and with your left hand grab tobacco, cedar, and or sage, say your prayer and put the tobacco down, cedar and sage in the fire. There is also a water basin where you can dip your fingers in the water and then sprinkle the fire. So what we bring to the fire, to the sacred fire, Mr. Mayor, we bring lawn chairs, food and drinks, a sacred drum, and we bring positive conversations. And that's exactly what we had on June the 22nd at Trinity Bellwoods Park. At Trinity Bellwoods Park, we told the corporate security, and we told the police officers in charge of the eviction that we were holding a space for all the Indigenous women, kids found in Canada. It was going to be a ceremonial space to remember those children. But neither the city, neither corporate security complied with our requests. We were told to leave the sacred fire, to leave Trinity Bellwoods Park or face charges. Our firekeeper, our elders told us that that was a violation of Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada, and it was also a violation of Section 11 of the Ontario Human Rights Act. So I hope someone from the Ontario Human Rights is listening in, because this is what truly transpired. And I had put the video to my YouTube channel that you can watch. I sent it to you, Mr. Mayor Tory. I sent it to you, Jim Hart. So this is what really transpired. We were not given proper respect. We always talk about truth and reconciliation. We always talk about building bridges. Unfortunately, all those bridges were burned.
Okay,
And
Miguel,
Barbara,
Miguel, I have to wrap you up there. You're at 10 minutes and 28 seconds, which is both deputations put together, and I'll let you run over a bit as well.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And that,
okay. Thank you, Miguel. I would please stay on the line for a minute because you've made a lot of comments there, and I'd like to turn your comments over to our Chief of Police for a response. I think it's important because you said a lot that needs to be responded to. Chief?
All right, I'm listening in.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. We're aware of the concerns being expressed by some members of the public and City Council. To be clear, people have the right to free expression and assembly, rights that our members facilitate peacefully and without incident every weekend at events across the city. The Toronto Police also have a role in supporting city operations like the clearing of the encampments. And we must do and support city operations, but we must do this while trying to maintain a safe environment for everyone, including the broader community, and in this case, city staff. The service continues to debrief on our role at Lamport. We do this after every large event to determine any needed changes for future events. And if we find there are training issues or evidence of possible misconduct, these things will be addressed fully by the service. With that, I'll ask Staff Superintendent Randy Carter to provide some comments as well.
Thank you, Chief. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, as the Chief said, we're in the process of debriefing after the events of last week, which includes the clearing of Alexandra Park. That operation, which took place the day before Lamport Park, was more orderly and required far less engagement and enforcement by your Toronto police officers. Now, this contrasts with the confrontational situation that city security and our officers faced at Lamport Stadium Park the following day, where protesters greatly outnumbered those living in the park and refused to comply with requests from city security and the police to leave that park. The Chief detailed me to be a common spokesperson with media partners, and along with the city, we communicated with those living in the park and those that were protesting in the park throughout the day, trying to de-escalate tensions and asking people to leave the now closed park on their own before we began, which is always our intention, to use proportionate enforcement to lawfully carry out the law in line with the trespass notices from the city. Further police resources were brought in from around the city as protesters continued to arrive to interfere with the city's work and became increasingly confrontational. This escalation continued into the evening, as some of you saw, at our number 14 Division Police Station, where 6 of our officers were injured after being sprayed with noxious substances and being pelted with objects. 2 members required treatment at hospital. At the end of the day, the city must be able to engage in their encampment strategy to transition those living in the parks to safe shelters. Demonstrators should have a right to peaceful expression and assembly, and all members of our police service should be able to go home safely and without injury. So as the Chief said, the debriefing process around this event is ongoing, and there are independent complaint processes that we understand have also been engaged. So as always, the Toronto Police Service will cooperate fully with these processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you for your comments. Questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Miguel, thank you for speaking, and also thank you for assisting Barbara as well.
You're welcome, Mr. Hart. Thank you.
Doobie, can you put on the next deputant, please?
Yes, Derek, the final deputant, should receive his prompt now.
You're welcome, Mr. Hart. Thank you very much.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready, Derek.
Okay, I'm just going to start my timer. So in this report, one of the training courses listed is number 100031, Provincial Statute Seminar. I don't know if this is covered, but for those that don't know, Section 34 of Regulation 340/94 of the Highway Traffic Act reads, It is a condition of every driver's license that the holder's signature appears in the appropriate place on the license. So in this report, it also says the TPS has undertaken the use of body-worn cameras to frontline officers with the goal of enhancing public trust and confidence in the police and increase police accountability. Well, you're not going to believe this, Chair Hart, but I recently got the police called on me again. And as a result, had my first interaction with a Toronto police officer wearing a body-worn camera. And I just want to add that Officer Bujia and Officer Thompson from 42 Division were as reasonable with me as anyone could hope for from a police officer. So in regards to this provincial statute seminar, this relates to the Highway Traffic Act. This is a letter I got from Derek Lett, Acting Director, Safety Program Development Branch from the Ministry of Transportation, July 23rd, 2021. He says, as is customarily the case with any form used to administer a program authorized by a statute, the applicant's signature on the form aids the ministry in confirming identity and certifying the correctness of the information provided by the applicant. As a result, the signature must meet criteria the ministry has established by policy in order to achieve these purposes. This policy is set out in an internal procedural document that the ministry has developed to assist staff in serving the public at Drive Test and Service Ontario centers. This policy is not accessible to the public. To request access to it, you would be required to submit a Freedom of Information for consideration. Now keep in mind, my original question was directed to the Deputy Minister, Laurie LeBlanc, in an email where I asked her, where can I go to see the evidence and verify for myself what the ministry's guidelines are on what constitutes as an acceptable signature? I got 42 Division called on me because some blue shirt customer service agent at the Drive Test Center at Victoria Park Terrace got it into their head that I have to follow one of their policies that says they can tell me how I can sign my signature. Can you believe that? A policy no one can see. They keep in their secret magic internal procedural document that they hide from the public. Okay, so here in reality, just so I know that Chief Raymer knows in the future, this is from Greater Vancouver Transportation Authority versus Canadian Federation of Students, British Columbia, Component 2009, where the Supreme Court of Canada said, no matter how broadly the word law is defined for the purposes of Section 1, a policy that is administrative in nature does not fall within the definition because it is not intended to be a legal basis for government action. Now, I know that, and now you know that, Chair Hart, and Chief Raymer knows that, and everyone else listening knows that. You know who doesn't know that? Those ding-dongs down at the Drive Test Center at Victoria Park Terrace. So if they want to call the police again on me again, I promise I won't resist. I won't, get physical or confrontational. But I mean, it's going to be Northern District Library. I'm telling you all over again. If they want to falsely arrest me, I'll go peacefully, and I'll just have my day in court, I guess, if that's what it's going to come down to again. And this one's from the Committee for the Commonwealth of Canada. What gets me is I read a tweet from PC Pappy on Twitter about how the police are just overrun with the increase of criminals on the street that got a rap list as long as you aren't, and how they got violent tendencies. And Officer Bujia and Thompson spent probably over an hour dealing with this BS item because these, not even public servants, agents working on behalf of public servants, just, I guess, whatever they imagine about the law becomes reality. And I got two other case laws here I ran out of time on, but it's in my written presentation. And I'll forward this, I guess, if I have to, on to Superintendent Bott. And so, yeah, that's my time.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you for your written presentation as well. Any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thanks very much, Derek. I'd also like to thank Nicole Corrado for her written submission as well. Board members, any questions on the report itself? Chief, I just have one really quick question. I notice in the report you do a lot of surveys of service members on training and how the training is working for them and how they feel it's applicable to the job. But I notice in all of that, the response from service members to those questionnaires is quite low, quite poor. Can you just let me know and let the board know what you're doing to improve that response rate?
Yeah, actually, the fact that the response rate is poor is in fact is inappropriate, quite frankly, and we're looking to ensure that it's actually mandatory that these things are completing. It is part of the training program. They are on duty and being paid by the organization at that time. And as far as I'm concerned, we've had some discussion on this, that it's part of their responsibility now to complete that in terms of completing the program. So our intention is to move forward in that regard.
Thanks, Chief. That's good to hear. Any other questions, board members? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak to this item? Can I have a motion to receive item number 15? Motion to receive. Ms. Kostaka, second by Ms. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 15 carries. That's the last item on our public agenda. Oh,
Chair.
Mayor Tory? Yes.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I was not here when you did the rundown. I was out making a housing announcement. I apologize for that. I just want, may I just make a comment on 2 or 3 items that appeared in the middle that obviously were not held, that all had to do with technology. Can I just make a brief comment? It's really just for sort of for the staff. I don't remember the names of them all, but they were, one was Versadex, another was Endpoint, and so on. I just have a concern, and this is in a way inescapable, but on the other hand, I think it is something we should take note of. Pardon, one of the challenges you face in big organizations like this, where you get into these contracts, one of which today I think went all the way back to 1993, is that you get, I'll call the word trapped. Now that can be a positive experience, but you get trapped into being with that supplier and then continuing to indefinitely extend contracts and buy things from them forever, kind of theoretically, only because, and one assumes the system is actually working quite well. But it results in 2 things, I think. First of all, and one of them I know did have an RFP involved with it, but it was an interesting point because the RFP involved, I think it said it had 43 people who made inquiries and got the material, but only one, the incumbent, made a bid because they've got themselves in a situation. I'm not saying they've done it in a devious way, but they've got themselves in a situation where they're the only one that can bid because the existing infrastructure is all there. My point in raising this is simply this. All of these, if you looked at them, involve tens of millions of dollars, very, very important systems for 911 and different things. I just hope that the management, including with our new CIO, will take a look at this in 2 respects. Number one, I would never want to see the sort of existence of a foundational installation of stuff that's been around for years stop us from innovating and looking at things that are even more innovative, even though it would be disruptive to have to change. And I'm not sure that's going on. I don't think it probably is, but I just want to make sure that we're not, sort of sticking with this technology that in some cases I know has been updated 5 times, but goes back to 1993. And secondly, I would think that we would be very wise at some stage to, well, not having an RFP necessarily, because and it's listed each time. There's no secret about it. Pardon me, that these are in effect non-competitive purchases, but that we have maybe somebody as a kind of fairness person just take a look at the terms of the extension, so as simply to make sure that we're not, because we're not having a competition, we're not paying more than we should for the extension, because you do get captive in that sense, and that you really don't have much negotiating room with people because that's the person you buy it from, because that's who's already there. So I just wanted to make that general comment because there were 3 or 4 of them, and they weren't all the same. They were all different, and they all had good explanation. But they all carried, or 3 of the 4 maybe carried with them this whole notion that, we've been doing business with these people, and we're like extending the contract for 3 years, or buying more of the same because we have all the existing stuff. And I just worry sometimes that you get into a certain place where it's not necessarily in the best interest when you're doing all these millions of dollars. So that was my comment, and I would have made it, and I apologize for interrupting the meeting now to do it, but I just wanted to it's really just a comment as opposed to any particular thing I wanted.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor Tory. Those points are well taken, and I know for a fact that the service is aware of all of those issues that you've just raised. And it might benefit all of us and the public as well if our CIO could make a brief comment on the issues that the mayor just raised. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The points are indeed very well taken. If you'll recall, we've talked about a program of IT rationalization. On coming in and doing the survey of our systems, I am finding systems that are outdated and are on long contract. And we're prioritizing the review of those on a business case basis to look at which systems need to be rationalized first and earliest, as well as looking at whole systems of technology. For example, how much technology we have in our cars, and can we rationalize and reduce the footprint for all of that? So we're taking a strategic approach. I think some of these contracts, if I had more ability to examine them, more analytic procurement, et cetera, capacity, well, we might be looking at reprocuring these or looking at these a bit harder. But these are not in any way bad choices that we're making or foregoing opportunities at the present time. Some of these contracts will go their full term, and some of these we may re-examine within the term of the contract itself as we get around to them in the IT rationalization program. And I would be more than happy to bring a presentation to the board on the IT rationalization program, the progress that we've made so far, because we have made some substantial progress in the last year, and where we're going next with all of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stairs. We'll follow up on that offer with you. Thanks, appreciate it. Board members, that concludes our last item. Can I have a motion to adjourn the public meeting? Ms. Kostakis, can I have a seconder? Vice Chair Nunziata, all in favor? That's carried. For everyone's information, the next public meeting will be on Monday, September the 27th, 2021. Thank you, and have a good day, everyone.